he's confronted by the consequences of his misrule. What's happening in Kursk and in Ukraine is a consequence of his decision to invade and to weaken his army, and also to point the incompetence and to allow the infighting which goes on inside the system. So he's desperate, as our former Prime Minister might have said, to take back control. I think that's what was all about on Monday. He's now must deal with this immediately. That's what I think he will do, an incursion. As you said, he's battered, he's bruised, but I don't think he's defeated. I think we should expect more war.
Plenty in Keir Starmer's Red Box this week, as well as notes about how much paying the rail drivers will cost. There's bound to be something about Ukraine's attempts to take the war to Vladimir Putin. The Times this morning reports that the Ministry of Defence has confirmed that UK weapons can be used on Russian soil. You might think they don't have much choice as it's already happening. Let's get an insight into what is going on in the MOD and the Foreign Office. John Foreman is a former British Defence attaché to Moscow and Kyiv. We can speak to him now. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Steve.
Was there originally nerves? I remember we spoke to James Heapy about maybe a year and a half ago when he was in government, and he said he actually was quite comfortable with Ukrainians using British ordnance against Russians in Russia. But he was kind of slapped down after saying that. And it was saying, well, no, we're not going that far. This has been a war of increments when it comes to British support. Are you surprised we've got here this quickly, or should we have got here sooner?
No, I think the policy of the British government has actually been pretty consistent for the last 2.5 years. I remember when we were in the meetings with Shoigu and Gerasimov in Moscow before the invasion, they were complaining about us providing weapons, NLAWs, anti-tank weapons and self-defense weapons to help Ukraine defend itself. And the Russians complained about that. And I think there has been a sort of gradual process of clarification of what weapons can be used where. I mean, Ukraine has an inherent right of self-defense. That includes the action it's taking inside Kursk. I think there's a big difference between the sort of tactical weapons which Ukraine is using on the ground, shorter range stuff, and also between that and Storm Shadow, which I don't think the government has changed its position on, despite some rumours after the election.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point, because I remember the rows was about giving them planes, and it was always okay. It's okay to give them guns, but you can't give them planes, and that does seem now, as we get into the third year of the war. Was that a distinction without a difference? Was that the right thing to do, or could we have actually been bolder quicker? Maybe we'd have had a shorter war as a result of it.
I think we should be bold in 2022, definitely. I think there was a sort of great reluctance by some of our European partners in America about risk of, quote, escalation. And many politicians, not in the UK, I would say, deterred themselves. They listened to what Putin was saying, and they constrained themselves by not wishing to be seen to be escalatory. So we had this debate about jets. We've had a debate about long-range weapons. We had a debate about tanks. I always remember the maxim of the old First Sea Lord, where he said that moderation in war is imbecility. The essence of war is violence. Yeah. We can't ask Ukraine to defend itself with one or two hands tied behind its back. And I think that Ukraine should have the right to use long-range weapons, missiles against key military targets inside of Russia. But that's the position of the United States, and I don't think that position is going to change anytime soon.
Because the argument is we've already wound up Putin by supporting Ukraine. Ukraine is already in an all-out war with Putin. I guess it's the ghost of tactical nuclear weapons. Is that the thing? Is that the thing on people's minds, that you can push Putin very far but not too far? Is that still the thinking in Washington and even in London?
I think the nuclear argument is always thrown out there. Russia knows what it's doing when it throws a nuclear threat at us. Did a big nuclear exercise before the invasion to warn the West not to get involved directly in the war. That seems to have worked. So we had this large tactical nuclear exercise recently in 2 or 3 phases, which again is reported that Russia's about to use nuclear weapons. I think Russia is not going to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. I think that is all to do with threatening, is just to try and situate us and get us to constrain ourselves. Russia knows that any use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine would have catastrophic consequences on its support from India and China and others around the world.
Yeah. Just finally, how bad is this for Putin? There was the whole Prigozhin thing, and that looked like it was bad for him, and then he stamped down on that. Ukrainians, getting some degree of movement into Russia. Russia having to build trenches in their own country to defend themselves against Ukraine. First invasion since 1941. How bad is this for Putin, do you think?
Well, I obviously was shocked. To take a heartstone not to laugh at him. His predicament on Monday when he was ranting and raving against his subordinates for having let him down. But of course, he's confronted by the consequences of his misrule. What's happening in Kursk and in Ukraine is a consequence of his decision to invade and to weaken his army, and also to point the incompetence and to allow the infighting which goes on inside the system. So he's desperate, as our former Prime Minister might have said, to take back control. I think that's what it was all about on Monday. He's now must deal with this immediately. That's what I think he will do, an incursion. As you said, he's battered, he's bruised, but I don't think he's defeated. I think we should expect more war, no peace. I think he's demonstrated over the last 25 years that he can adapt and demonstrate resilience. Yeah. We've been through a whole series of disasters, not just Prigozhin and the loss of the Moscow Bar and the consequences of waiting to take Kyiv in 3 days, but Beslan and the original Kursk disaster. He's actually managed to come out of it. But I think this will be a test of him. And of course, what the elites in Moscow are looking at are saying, has the man still got it in him to sort out the problem which he's created?
Yeah, he manages to cling on through most things, doesn't he? John, really
he's a great survivor, yeah.
He is indeed. John, really interesting stuff from you. Thank you for joining us. That's John Foreman, the former British defence attaché to Moscow and to Kyiv.